Welcome to the Data Democracy, presented by renowned O'Reilly author Ole Olesen-Bagneux, empowered by Xenia. Make your data accessible and discoverable by anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Hi everybody, I'm Ole Olesen-Bagneux, Chief Evangelist in Xenia and the author of the Enterprise Data Catalog published with O'Reilly. On the Data Democracy, I have conversations on new trends in data and AI with data leaders and data practitioners. Today's guest is Gregor Zeiler. Gregor is an entrepreneur based in Vienna, Austria, heading up a company called daitastack. That's data spelled D-A-I-T-A. daitastack is supporting software vendors making their offering more precise and targeted. I wanted to talk to Gregor as he has a long time experience as an entrepreneur with an impressive record. And also he is a thought leader. He recently published an article on data democracy that caught my attention. I found it inspiring and I wanted to chat with him about it. Here are my 3 takeaways from my conversation with Gregor. If you want to be independent in IT, it's a good idea to provide both consultancy and software. Typically what you do is you start with consultancy, accumulate capital, and invest in software that is expensive, but once it's up and running, you can sell it and scale it faster than your consultancy services. Gregor has a lot of experience in this field, and there's a lot of things to understand if you want to do that. So I really encourage you to listen to what Gregor has to say. My second takeaway is that AI is redefining data engineering and data management, radically improving the ways we do these things. And we also need to stay in the AI game, even though we find capabilities and offerings dubious at times. It's simply a matter of accumulating experience. Once the good products hits the market, we all need to be aware of how AI works in a lot of different contexts. My third takeaway: decentralization means data democratization, and Gregor has some in-depth insights from his career on how this evolved in the last 20 to 30 years. Okay, enough of me talking. Let's hear what Gregor has to say. Hi, Gregor.
Hi, Ole.
I'm happy to have you on.
Yeah, I'm happy that you have invited me to your podcast. So thank you very much, Ole, for that.
Oh, obviously, Gregor. It's a pleasure. Okay, so for the listeners, do you care to explain a little bit about where you're based and what you do?
Yeah, I'm based in the beautiful south of Vienna in Austria, but I'm working for clients all over the world. So let me explain my career. So a little bit more than 30 years ago. So it's a long time. During my first job, I discovered my love for data management and data engineering, and that stays with me ever since. So what fascinates me is that constant innovation in the field. So think about 30 years ago about that gorgeous BI front ends, which helps the business to build their own reports by drag and drop, or things like that powerful ETL tools or data integration tools, which are able to move data from the data sources to the centralized data warehouse solutions. Or that big data technologies, which occurs a little bit after, or currently the impact of from AI on data management. That's never boring me, so I'm very excited about that continuous innovation in that field, and that makes me proud of that, to be in that field and work for that topics. So I've spent most of my time in data analytics consulting, gaining a lot of experience implementing data warehouse solution, big data, or data lakes and data lake houses, mostly in large enterprises. And because I have a natural aversion on boring, repetitive work, I started to automate the data engineering processes, so 20 years ago, roundabout. And this quickly led to my first data warehouse automation software I built together with my team at that time. And around about 8 years afterwards, I sold that company to an even larger consulting company. And we decided together to build a new data automation tool, an even better one, with all the experiences from the past inside and do it a little bit better. So, in other words, for the last 12 years of my career, I was mainly in the role of a software vendor, but embedded in a consulting company. So
Mhm.
only the last 2 years were spent as a pure software vendor carved out from that consulting company. And at the end of the last year, I decided to found a new company, which is called daitastack, and where I can use my experience in data management and building SaaS companies and help data and AI unicorns
Mhm.
to succeed their first steps in their journey. So that's my career, around about 30 years in a few seconds compressed.
It's a nice
Hopefully,
summary.
this gives a picture of what I did in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a super nice summary, Gregor. A bit younger than you, so I remember 30 years ago I had a very, very nice Olivetti computer, and I enjoyed like moving things from one floppy disk to the hard disk to the other floppy disk,
Yeah.
and played around with WordPerfect. I had a laser printer that could spit out 200
Yeah.
pages a minute. Yeah, so that's obviously it's some time ago now, right? All this is very interesting, and I want to dive into that experience more. But first of all, let's hear a bit more about what is DataStack.
Yeah, so let me explain. So I think in a world where the data landscape is becoming increasingly complex, I want to help to make data in the AI more tangible.
Mhm.
So for me, this has two dimensions. On the one hand, I want to help end user companies to find the right data architecture, the right data strategy, and of course, the right tools for building those things up. And on the other hand, I mainly support specialized software companies in the field of data engineering and data management to gain more market awareness with their products and to succeed the first steps on their journey to being a successful SaaS company. So in this case, I use my experience from the past, as I have explained, with my own products, and especially the lessons learned of the last 20 years as a software vendor. And I want to help my clients with that experience I collected in my past career.
Yeah, yeah, and I also want to get back to that, but I just feel like asking, given that you provide these services, how, like right now, in the current economic situation in the world, in the political situation in the world, everything that's going on around the planet, how do you see the world of software vendors today? What are their challenges? What do they need to focus on? What are their obstacles?
So I think that the challenges are mainly what's going on that data democratization journey.
Hmm.
I think there's a major shift in the world currently in how to handle data. So that comes from that idea that to handle data as a product and that data product thinking in general, moving the responsibility or the ownership of data to the more business related areas. So that's what from my point of view, is the most important challenge for companies right now to do the right things to support that approach in a proper manner. So using data. So years ago, I heard that argument that data is the new gold and everything like that.
Oh
So
yes.
that's clear. Yeah, I think that's obvious over a few decades in the past that data is very important for getting being a successful company. you need to have a picture of what you're doing with your company, what's more or less successful, and then you have to react on that. So data was always kind of an important thing, but with all these new approaches around data and AI especially, it's important to give the users or the data owners the capability to use that data in a proper manner. And that's the biggest challenge in comparison to the approaches what we experience in the past. So let's assume we had in the past a centralized team, very skilled in that area of data engineering and data management. And now we have decentralized teams which don't have that high skill level in data engineering, but they need to do the preparation of the data according to their use cases. So they need to have support in that area. And that's the most important challenge from my point of view, to enable organizations with those capabilities that business areas are able to prepare the data for their use cases in a proper manner.
You strike me as providing very succinct answers, but we'll circulate back to some of this. I want to ask you the lessons learned being a software vendor as part of a consultancy. You mentioned that, and I also introduced you in this way prior to our conversation for the listeners. What kind of lessons learned is that? Because it's a typical setup, right? You do consultancy and software, and then you transition more and more towards software. Obviously, it's harder in the beginning, but then you can scale it faster once you get it up and running. So what's your lessons learned there?
So I would say it's the other way around. It's easier in the beginning, but harder spreading out. So that's the issue.
Great.
So there are pros and cons. So so let's say I'm really a fan of that approach, because being embedded in a consulting company is a perfect starting situation for building a software product, because you can test your product ID in many projects. So you have perfect feedback for that product idea in that surroundings of a consulting company. And it's also very convenient to be able to finance your first development steps outside from projects to being sponsored by them. So that's the big advantage of that approach from my point of view. But at some time, there's a kind of a conflict between the interests of consulting services and the product areas. And for instance, as a small area, a product area in a larger consulting company, you're always at the back of the queue. So let's say the second priority or the last priority, allocating budget or things like that. So from my point of view, this is the latest point where you have to think about the emancipation of being an independent software company outside from that consulting company. So then you should quickly change the mindset of your employees to have that less service-oriented mindset, more product-related mindset, and to find somebody who not only give you the money for expansion, but above all to help you to drive that expansion. So maybe you don't need that much money at that point, because you have already a customer base which is able to finance your further steps. But the most important thing from my point of view is to find somebody who can help you to step outside that previous ecosystem of that consulting company and conquer the markets in a broader approach. So that's the most important thing, and understanding the pros and cons of that approach and finding the right timing to step out of that approach. That's what I have learned the last 20 years, and I get a lot of experience on that, and that's how I want to help others in that stage. So I'm a big fan of that approach, but you have to find the right timing and the right argumentation to stand this kind of approach.
It's almost like when I listen to you, Gregor, it's almost like it makes me think of this concept that I encountered in university in my studies, tacit knowledge. Like this is something. It's like winemaking or baking bread. Like you can write it down on a piece of paper, but you don't get it before you have actually been in the situation and felt exactly like, okay, this is the moment that we do this. It's something that simply takes experience. It sounds like.
Yeah, I think that's in each and every area you have that thing that you cannot write everything down and transform your knowledge to or share your knowledge by writing down all those things. You have to experience that for yourself, and then you are able to learn about that. And of course, you can tell somebody your experience and share your experience, and maybe they do the same thing and remember what you have said at that time that they will experience. So I think you need a kind of a help in that stage to make the right decisions and reduce the conflicts between those different interests inside that organization. So it could be an advantage even for those to use the product and the consulting service together. It's a question of positioning and things like that. So this depends on the use case of the product and the capabilities of the product and the direction of the positioning of the consulting services, how they can interact in a proper manner and get advantage from each other or synergies in that area.
Yeah, sure. I know a lot of people that works in exactly this setting that you describe here, and it's just a very. I won't call it a maze, but it's pretty important to get it right, and it's not easy to get it right. The balance and understanding the momentum and the strategies in which directions you want to go with what service and software. Anyway, you mentioned also that you are now supporting specialized software vendors with daitastack. So how do you select them, and in which areas are they located?
So that's a very good question, and it has occupied myself for quite some time. So let me explain a little bit the background of my thinking about that. So I can't remember a time where there are so many new software vendors in the market in the area of data and AI right now.
Exactly.
And for me, there are two main reasons for that. So the first is AI is opening a wealth of new product approaches that make data management and data engineering much more efficient than in the past. So, and the second thing is that we are currently experiencing the most massive disruptive step forwards to data democratization with that data mesh or more data product thinking approach. So data democratization in particular is dramatically changing the requirements of the tool landscape for companies. So with decentralization, data governance, data marketplaces, or in generally tools that enable the data product teams to build their data products as easily and quickly as possible are becoming extremely important. So that's the reason why I'm focusing especially on those kind of products which are currently approaching that paradigm shift to support especially the needs of the companies in that area. So that's a little bit the thinking behind how do I select special vendors in that area, and hopefully I can help them with my experience and helping to be more successful in the go-to-market areas.
Sure can. I do agree in all what you said. I think it's also something that we have to get right in the sense that I do agree that AI obviously is making data management more efficient, more powerful, more easy. If we get it right, because there is a I don't want to sound pessimistic, but there is a substantial risk in unleashing AI. I'm also obviously concerned about the regulatory aspects, but more than that, it's just also the functional aspect of AI, right? You want to get it right. If not, you're just building, as I see it, you're just building technical debt in another part of the stack or the pipelines or whatever you want to like, wherever you want to position that new technology. It leaves a positive impact with potentially a negative side effect if you do not take that into account up front, right? So I'm thinking a lot about that myself. I'm sure you are as well. It's not really a question. It's more of a rant.
Yeah, but I can share my thoughts on that as well. So I agree on that. But in general, when you think about each new technology approach which occurs in the past, there's a kind of a step back in some kind of quality and engineering and so on. And
Mm,
after a while, the optimization of that approach occurs again, and you get the same level as you have in the past. And then it's getting faster to increase the efficiency and everything like that. And I think what you have mentioned in terms of AI and the concerns of using that kind of technology during data engineering and data management, I expect as well that there is a kind of a step back. So I'm more related to the data engineering part. And when I'm thinking about AI, I'm thinking about that AI could help users, especially the business related users, to generate a piece of code for that their purpose is to prepare the data. So you know that Copilot activities and helping users to generate code by entering some words. I need to have that, and then the code engine generates the code in behind. So I think that will be the approach. But when you
mm.
compare the results of that approach right now with the, so let's say a skilled person which is preparing the code for that, so it's a step back.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I think, let's say, a few months in the future, or year in the future, or whatever the time frame will be, the level of that generated code will be maybe similar to that what you have right now on a human-produced code, or maybe even better. So that's what I expect. So you will have a step back on that level and quality in some areas when you enter in a new technology. But if you don't do it, you will lack for the far future with the capabilities of this approach. So
Exactly. Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
it's important to enter those things and learn also from the negative parts of that things, that it's a step back maybe for the first time.
Obviously, it's like wearing glasses with augmented reality, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Why are big tech vendors staying in this game? It's not
Mm,
because they are necessarily very persuaded about their own products. It's simply
mm,
because they need to take the time to develop something, and they need to accumulate the experience while they're doing
yeah,
that. So
right.
so we're seeing this effect of like promoting products that will
Mm,
most certainly never take off simply because they need to stay in the game. They need to
yeah,
collect the experience, and that is obviously something that is going on for generative AI at large,
yeah,
right? You want to stay in the game, you want to experiment, you want to make mistakes, simply because at some point we will crack the code, and you want to be able to have the experience to go fast once you do that, right? You don't
yeah,
want to jump on the train at that moment in time because that means that you've
yeah,
lost already, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so I agree
Okay.
on that. I agree on that a lot, obviously. So you recently published a large analysis on data democratization in companies. Can you explain what it was about?
Yeah, so I think when strong trends like data mesh and even better, the data product thinking emerge, many people follow them without thinking about the implications and the motivations for doing so. So that's why I wanted to use this article to create an understanding of why everything was centralized years ago and why currently exactly the opposite is the only viable approach. So to understand that major shift from left to right, I think it's important to explain the whole data democratization journey why we did it like this a few years ago, and why it's important to do it like that right now. So that's why I'm writing that article, to have a better understanding of the whole steps and the whole data democratization journey.
Interesting. It has this big diagram in the article. There's a bottom layer and a top layer. So what do these layer represent, and how do you distinguish between centralization and decentralization in the diagram in the article?
Yeah, so I think the diagram is a little bit complicated, but so the whole data democratization journey over, let's say, decades from 20, 30 years ago till now. And the lower section of the diagram is related, and the upper section of the diagram is more the business-related area, and the horizontal bar is the timeline from that past to the state right now. So on the very left-hand side of the diagram, you see the first step where I started that journey with that centralized data warehouse approaches, and even the reports at that time are built by IT-related staff and prepared for the business areas. So, and after a while, the first wave, from my point of view, of data democratization occurs with that self-service BI tools, which enables the business areas to build their own reports. They are even able to build additional KPIs on top of the data warehouse data for themselves to generate additional value out of that data. And in parallel, or let's say a few years after, those big data technologies occurs, and an interesting part happens at the time. An additional, more centralized approach, so that data lakes using that big data technologies occurs, because at that time everybody experienced, when you have a feature request changing the data warehouse, it takes long time to change all those things in the data warehouse itself. Maybe it's a better idea to provide the raw data from the data sources to the consumers of the business areas, the uncurated data inside the data lake. It's much more easier to pull them towards the data lake and give the, let's say, the data scientists at that time the capability to access those data layers. But it was uncurated data, so it's not easy to handle those data. Again, as a user, you have to prepare and then do all the quality assurance of those things, what you are using in this case. So that means that after a while, the combination of that big data or data lake approach and the curated data approach with the data warehouse architectures are combined in that lakehouse approach, using the big data technology for storing the data, but you also using the curation of data during in the course of the data warehouse architecture. So they are combining those both things to the lakehouse. It's also still kind of a, I say, more IT related or centralized approach for the data ownership and the data handling and the data management at the time. And the most massive step towards data democratization currently is taking place with that focus on data products, whereby the last domain of that ID related stuff, the data engineering, the data management, moves now to the decentralized data teams, and they have to do the job of data engineering for themselves. So for me, decentralization in that context means that the ownership, or the responsibility for data, is now decentralized, and that you handle data as a product. So that means that you have to have a life cycle on that, that you have to ensure quality and the service level on providing your data to third parties or other organizational units in your organization. And those data products are now managed by the data product teams. And the storage of the data could still be on a centralized data platform. That doesn't matter. So it's, of course, it makes sense not to build tons of different data platforms for each and every data product in your organization. It makes sense to have one common data platform with different data product teams working on that data platform, using their data or managing their data for themselves. So that's what I want to point out with that picture, the different steps, and each step has a common reason why we did it in the past. So centralizing everything is the reason why you are able to prepare the data so that it's ready to use. And doing that same thing in an uncurated manner in the data lake, we experienced that this is not the right way to do it. So on the one hand, business areas require more raw data, and then they get it, and then they experience, okay, it's not that easy to manage that. So what we have to learn from all those steps is that if we decentralize the responsibility of data, we have to care about that these teams are able to prepare the data and do all the jobs, not only developing a solution. So that's the easiest thing from my point of view, but the daily operating and the ensuring of the quality of the daily operating and ensuring a dedicated service level of freshness of that data. That are additional things what data teams now need to do. And you have to care about that they are enabled as easy as possible with those things, because from my point of view, the more people are doing data engineering, the average of skill level is lower than in the past with the centralized, very specialized teams. So you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to
sure.
make it quite easy to do that. So that's the major thing what I want to point out with
Yeah,
that picture.
yeah, agreed. And I love that diagram. I encourage you to. I maybe remember it. I maybe will remember it myself, but if not, please remember to add it to the comments when we publish this episode, because it's a great
Yeah.
diagram. Okay, so finally, I prepared a question that that actually popped up when we were preparing this conversation, because I think it's a very fun observation that you have. How mature do you think the implementation of data mesh approach is in the US and in Europe? And do you have any, like, I know you have a special take on that, a surprising take. Can you reveal what that is, Gregor?
Yeah, I remember that. So the first surprising finding regarding the differences between Europe and US was when it come to the adopting of the data vault modeling approach a few years ago. So although data vault as a modeling approach was founded by Dan Lindstedt, an American guy, the adoption of that data modeling approach is much higher in Europe than in the US. So, and this was the result of a study, I think a few months ago, so at the end of the last year. And I found at that time, I also came across a post of Joe Race, and he's asking for how do data modeling differ by geography and the type of the company. And I'm looking at the answers to that question of his post. It was clear, and this was the support of the results of that study, that the adoption and the maturity of using that data modeling approach in Europe is much higher than in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So that's surprising for me, because it was founded in the US and the adoption somewhere else is much higher than in the region where it was founded. And a similar observation I have made about the adoption of data mesh, the approach itself. So also invented by Jean-Marc Tignani, an American. So I feel that there are far more concrete implementations in Europe than in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And as a European guy, what I'm and particularly proud of is this week the Data Analytics Summit from Gartner happens in London, takes place in London. So, and they had a slide where they named 2 European software vendors as standalone vendors for data product creation.
Mhm.
So I'm not really happy with that term standalone vendor. I think what they really mean is a comprehensive vendor for data product management and all the aspects of supporting the product lifecycle in that area. So there are 2 names mentioned at that picture. Both are in Europe, and there are not 10 additional ones from US companies. There are only 2, and those 2 are
Mm.
European software vendors. So that makes me really proud of that the European software market is really innovative and is approaching the needs and the requirements of that paradigm shift, what we are experiencing right now with that data democratization.
Mhm.
And there are a large number of really excellent, innovative product providers in Europe, understanding that need for that, supporting that paradigm shift. And I know that Cinia, so your company as well, is enhancing the data catalog capabilities with that enterprise data marketplace capabilities, following that need, what companies currently need to support the decentralized approaches to find data products and allocate if they are useful for their use cases, or build somebody and provide and serve the data products via the data marketplace. So that's, from my point of view, really the right direction to go for, and that makes me happy that European companies are on track with those things and doing the right things at the right time.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Obviously, as someone who drafted together with very, very intelligent colleagues, I have to say, drafted the roadmap for Sinea. I'm obviously thankful for that comment. And I think more in general, I agree. I mean, I have not seen scientific studies of this, but I must say that this eternal, like, humble approach where people say, yeah, we're from Europe, we're not as good at tech as the US or Asia. I don't really buy that anymore. I think European software vendors are really great, and I think we have a lot
Yeah,
of great software vendors all across the continent. So I don't see no reason we shouldn't be proud of that. And so I agree in that. I agree a lot in that. I don't think we're bad at tech at all. Obviously, that's not an excuse to not develop further, but I agree with you. And obviously, it's quite surprising that the adoption of both data mesh and data vault
yeah,
is taking off in Europe with such a substantial difference than the US.
yeah. I think the reason for that is that I think the adoption of that data management and data engineering processes and the skill level on that area maybe is useful for that kind of development also in the software area, and supporting that early adoption of those things in our region.
Hmm.
And I fully agree. A couple of years ago, it was very important to be an US-based software vendor, and then a few years later, you occur in the UK markets, and a few years later, you occur in the European market. So it was always a kind of a step forward a few years ago with those enhancements of your market. But currently, there's no difference between being a European software vendor or an US vendor. You have all the capabilities to reach all the markets worldwide. And that's what you need to do. And I think, from my point of view, we can really be proud of our software vendors in our region and what they are building right now, and doing the right things.
Agreed, Gregor. Agreed. Yeah, I think I let time fly a little more than I ought to, but I got excited, especially here at the end. I think that was a very surprising and fun ending. But it's been a pleasure altogether, Gregor, having you on. I want to take a moment also and thank you, thank you, the listeners. More and more listeners are joining. I'm very thankful for that. So thank you each and everyone for listening in. And Gregor, it was a pleasure to have you on.
Yes, thank you very much, Ole, for having me on your podcast.
Stay in touch.
So thank you. Bye-bye.